Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
The European Parliament is set to freeze ratification of its U.S. trade deal. The bloc demanded clarity after President Trump's new 15% tariff. The move follows a Supreme Court ruling limiting his emergency powers. EU leaders say approval can't move forward amid growing trade uncertainty. Let's stay on tariffs, and I'm joined now by Missouri Representative Jason Smith, who also serves as the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, and he is the chief tax writer in Congress. Chairman Smith, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let's start with the elephant in the room. The tariffs were a big source of fiscal revenue for 2025. Do you anticipate that all will get refunded? And if not all, much of it will get refunded now?
To say that the tariffs were a significant impact of revenue is to say it lightly. In fact, it has been projected by the Congressional Budget Office that the tariffs that were in place would reduce the national deficit by $3 trillion. And that's pretty substantial. However, the Supreme Court decision is not going to affect the revenue that's coming in for the most part, because under a lot of the federal trade statutes, in regards to unfair trade, whether it's Section 122, 301, or 232, the president is going to be able to levy his authority to implement virtually the same tariffs that were in place under IEEPA that the Supreme Court threw out.
Sure, but the tariffs that were implemented through IEEPA, Representative Smith, is it your message maybe to corporate America that if they've joined this lawsuit that maybe they shouldn't be expecting the tariff refunds? How do you expect that to play out?
You know, it's really unfortunate that the Supreme Court was crickets when it came to their very large opinion, but they didn't even address this. So, of course, now it's going to be reprimanded down to the lower courts. They will make those decisions, but it's going to be a process that's going to take 3 to 4 years probably before it's addressed.
There is this question of uncertainty. That's certainly one of them, Chairman Smith. What's going to happen with the refunds? But then there's this other lingering uncertainty of having a president who first announces 10% tariffs and then 15% with Section 122, which can only be in place for a limited number of days. How is this helping uncertainty in corporate America? Do you think that there could have been an argument to just said, okay, the Supreme Court has made its decision and we carry on as is?
You know, certainty is great for the economy. That's why we passed the big, beautiful bill, the Working Families Tax Cut, 6 months early to give the certainty to those small businesses, those big companies. But in regards to the tariffs, I think it's very certain. There's probably not going to be any refunds. I don't see a pathway in Congress that there's going to be refunds. And so you're going to look at over the course of President Trump's administration, he's going to continue to use those tariff revenues to bring down the deficit.
There is another matter to this, though, and it can easily, and many people have framed this as simply a consumer price hike. Representative Smith, do you expect that all of the Republicans in Congress will be behind this when we're just 3.5 months away from a midterm election where affordability is on the ticket?
I think it's very important to understand trade policy just as a whole of where it is with all Americans, but also all members of Congress and the United States Senate. It's a deeply divided issue, whether you're Republican or whether you're Democrat. There's not a uniform opinion of one party. In fact, you have Democrats that agree with Republicans and Republicans agree with Democrats on various aspects of whether they're pro-tariffs or they're anti-tariffs. So if something moves forward from a legislative perspective, it will have to be bipartisan, because it is such a bipartisan division when it comes to those different items. But let's look at what tariffs have done. We have the lowest trade deficits since 2009. And when you refund tariffs, you're refunding money to corporations that benefit by purchasing products outside of the United States. Who benefited from tariffs was the U.S. manufacturers and U.S. farmers.
So to be clear, are you and your colleagues working on legislation right now to codify tariffs?
We've been working on trade legislation throughout my 3 years as chairman of the Ways and Means. If you just look at most recently in the last month, we reinstituted and extended the Haiti and the AGOA trade preferences program. So we're in the middle of all the different trading aspects. If you look at the big, beautiful bill, we addressed de minimis when it came to China and other packages coming in the United States. We're going to continue to do so.
Tariffs or not, the debt is still exploding because, in large part, the one big, beautiful bill, Representative Smith. Are we done cutting the deficit? Is this it for now?
We can't be done cutting the deficit. When you look at a national security threat, it's definitely our fiscal house. When you're looking at approaching $40 trillion in national debt, we have to be looking at ways to trim the budget 24/7.
So are you then, with all of this, disappointed in a lot of your Republican colleagues? There have been some, Senator Paul, Representative Bacon, who publicly applauded the Supreme Court ruling. Representative Smith, it doesn't seem like there's cohesion at this moment.
Well, Senator Paul didn't vote for the big, beautiful bill either. So there's always division within the Republican Party. But guess what? There's bigger division in the Democrat Party because Hakeem Jeffries is not even the minority leader of the House. His liberal base affects all of his policies, his decisions. That's why we're in a government shutdown right now with the Department of Homeland Security and why they're not funding TSA agents in the airport, why they're not funding FEMA, and why they're not funding the U.S. Coast Guard.
Yeah, there's a lot of backlash this weekend about a brief decision to shut down TSA PreCheck. Chairman Smith, where do we stand on funding the Department of Homeland Security? Is there any movement?
There has been zero movement from what I have seen. The Democrats are demanding unrealistic expectations and solutions. They're the ones who shut down government. They need to come back to the table and make sure those TSA agents, the Coast Guard, the Secret Service, FEMA, that they have paychecks.
There still has been just mass outrage about what's happening with immigration and with ICE. Representative Smith, where would anyone budge on this? How does it come to a solution?
Well, what doesn't make sense is that they say they want to defund ICE, but guess what? ICE was funded for 4 years in the one big, beautiful bill. So by shutting down the Department of Homeland Security budget, that does not affect funding of ICE. ICE is continuing to be funded because we did it for 4 years. So it is absolutely only politics of why the Democrats are shutting down government. They say that they're doing to defund ICE, but they know that they're not defunding ICE by shutting down Department of Homeland.
Some of the polls, though, have moved in the wrong direction for this administration, be it on things the president ran on immigration, on this economy, on affordability. Again, 3.5 months away from the midterms. Is this an administration and a party, a GOP, that risks losing control of the narrative?
Anyone can find a poll that favors their narrative. There's no question about it. What I will say is I was back home in my congressional district all last week, traveling throughout my 28 counties, and people were very supportive of the president's immigration policies and securing the border. And the fact that 3 million people illegals have been deported or voluntarily left.
I still think some of the images coming out have shocked people. But all this said, Representative Smith, there are a lot of issues that this administration now needs to tackle, especially in light of Friday's ruling. What are you expecting for the President's State of the Union address tomorrow?
I think the president's going to highlight what he's done in his first year in office, which I believe what President Trump has done in his first year of office is more than what most presidents do in 8 years. When you look at securing the border, which we just discussed, creating the largest tax cut in U.S. history and fulfilling his campaign promises of no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, tax relief for seniors, increasing the child tax credit, creating the Trump investment accounts, making 100% expensing of new factories. You've seen more than $10 trillion of investment come back into the United States. We have the lowest interest rate in 5 years, the lowest gas prices in 5 years. And guess what? The murder rate in the United States is the lowest since 1900. These are huge successes. But when you look on the foreign stage, the president has eliminated 8 different conflicts. So I think that's a lot of success that some presidents would be begging for.
Although there might be another conflict brewing with Iran, or at least an escalation, which also might undo some of the work in gas and oil prices. Representative Smith, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us. Representative Jason Smith, Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee.